Thanks to Galaxy Lamps for sponsoring this video. I have a question for you. Have you ever wanted your own personal night sky in your room? Well, that's convenient because the Galaxy projector from Galaxy Lamps is perfect for exactly that. This isn't just a lamp or projector, but an actual galaxy that lights up and covers the walls and the ceiling, transforming any room into a planetarium so that it looks like you're floating through space. It's fully customizable so that you can change the RGB colors, brightness, and rotation speed, and set an on-off timer, which makes it perfect as a nightlight. All the customization is done through an app on your phone, but if you prefer to be hands-free, it's Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant compatible. If you're into astronomy, good energy-efficient tech, or just like anything that has pretty colors and twinkly lights, like me, then this is for you. You can get your projector by clicking the link below to get the Galaxy Projector 2.0 with 15% off by using the code DREAMJELLY at checkout. Thanks again to Galaxy Lamps for the sponsor, and now, on to the video. If you ever had a chance to look inside the PE supply closet of your school, you probably noticed all of the bright and fun, multicolored plastic stuff. There's wiffle balls, dodgeballs, basketballs, hula hoops that are bent in a few spots so that they're more hula shapes, the distinct smell of rubber kickballs, and those mesh jerseys that haven't been washed since 2002, and lots of other miscellaneous objects in between. I find it really interesting that even though these closets were full of pretty typical sports equipment, there were still a lot of other activities beyond just sports that padded out the school gym classes of the 2000s. In earlier decades, schools were seemingly a lot more focused on traditional fitness, with kids doing things like weightlifting and rope climbing, if not near acrobatics in the middle of the school day. I mean, this looks like a military boot camp. These are teenagers. Why is everyone so muscly? I appreciate the idea of wanting to keep kids in shape, I guess, though I do feel like it was probably a lot easier to achieve this kind of standard when cosmic brownies hadn't been invented yet. Since the days of shirtless alphas in the schoolyard and gym uniforms that look like they're pulled straight out of an Urban Outfitters, PE activities have gotten a lot more tame and creative, shall we say. In my experience, it was actually kind of rare that we ever did something as simple as just sit-ups or playing a sport, especially during elementary school, where the main goal was to keep our attention just long enough to tire us out before going back to class. For some reason, one of the first things that always comes to my mind when I think of PE and its colorful supply closet isn't a sport or an activity or anything that has much practical use outside of an elementary school gym. Because while the basketballs and the mysteriously greasy communal jerseys you might wear while playing with them are a lot more prominent, there's only so much you can really do with a sports ball. But at one point in time, someone, somewhere, amidst the greatest athletes, chattiest gym bros, and sportiest sports scientists, there was invented perhaps the most versatile piece of gym equipment known to man, that being the scooter board. For something that doesn't actually incentivize much traditional physical exercise, at my school, these bad boys were pulled out on the regular. And even though I have so many memories of sitting on these things, scooting myself along by sort of crab walking with my legs, I couldn't even really tell you what their main purpose was. I can say for sure that they were involved in a lot of obstacle courses or tag team games, which I really thought was an Olympic sport with the way we were kind of constantly being thrown into a new one every week during gym. And I'm sure that these things are good for getting kids excited about exercising and strengthening their hand-eye coordination or something. But I guess I want to know what they were specifically intended for. Obstacle courses, scooter races, rolling over your own fingers and crying to the PE teacher about it? Or if their ingenious design was always meant to just be generally multi-purpose? Because these things are so versatile, I think everyone has their own specific memories tied to them. Though apparently these were not necessarily an international phenomenon, which I unfortunately learned after mentioning what I thought was the universal experience of butt scooting around in gym class to my Australian partner, which he had never done, let alone even heard of the scooters before. I don't know if it is just an American thing, but after getting an outside opinion, I did realize for the first time that I guess scooter boarding was kind of a weird activity. I'm also realizing now while looking at pictures of other kids that did use them that there was definitely more than one way to scoot, and sitting and crab walking with them might not have even been the most common way, but I'll always associate these things particularly with butt scoots. My school's supply closet also had, for some reason, multiple pairs of moon shoes, or probably some cheaper off-brand version that the funding could afford. I feel like these are definitely among some of the most well-remembered toys of the early 2000s because they're so random, yet they look so fun. These shoes will make you feel like you're on the moon, jumping as high as you could in space. If you were among the kids that desperately wanted their own pair of little foot trampolines because they seemed like the best footwear inventions of all time, right alongside Heelys and Skechers shape-ups, yet you were never able to actually try them, then I'm here to tell you, you really weren't missing out on much. I'm sorry to be the one to bear the bad news, or maybe alleviate your decades-old FOMO, but yeah, these things kinda sucked. Again, I'd sooner believe my school had some kind of cheap knockoff brand than the official moon shoes, so maybe that affected how they performed, not to mention that probably dozens of kids used them on a regular basis, which I doubt helped their springy moon jumpiness. In my humble experience, though, these did not live up to the hype. When I tried jumping with these things, it definitely didn't feel like I was jumping on the moon, or like I was jumping much at all, which was pretty disappointing. As for why these things were even used in my gym class to begin with, I couldn't tell you. They definitely seem like a piece of exercise equipment that someone probably thought was a modern and hip way to get kids active, but aside from maybe not even working that well to begin with, the practicality here is kinda lost on me. I'm just imagining a gymnasium full of 7-year-olds wearing clunky plastic boxes strapped to their feet, bumping into each other and falling over left and right, which seems like the inevitable outcome. I get the appeal to incentivize jumping as a form of exercise, but these seem like a solution to solve an imaginary problem. So that's a 1-star rating of moon shoes from me, and a rating to whichever school board exec pitched these to my small town elementary school, since they were mostly just then pitched to the supply closet. Even if the whole moon shoes thing was probably a bit more of a unique experience, what seems to surpass even the scooter boards as far as universal experiences go is the one and only gym class parachute. I'm yet again wondering if there was ever a true intended use for it, or if it was just one of those things that infiltrated the education system one day and no one ever bothered to question it after that. Looking at you, moon shoes guy. It seems the most common parachute use was the old make it a balloon and sit underneath it like a tent method. It's yet another tool that seems like it has a relatively short list of uses, none of which are all that exercise heavy. I guess it doesn't really matter. If there's an exception to be made for PE activities that aren't actually very physical, it's gotta be for the parachute. Even if just for it being fun to look at. As much fun as general parachute usage was, though, nothing could ever hold a candle to the great cultural phenomenon that is Field Day. Field Day at my elementary school was an all-day outside event that the whole school went to, and it really was the event of the year. I'm sure the setup varies between schools, but I always experienced it as a huge circle of different activities set up around the outdoor track where we'd shift around every 30 minutes until we reached the end. Were a lot of the activities way lamer than the few that were the most popular? Of course. And was it always excessively hot and sweaty so that it actually wasn't that fun anymore by the end? Maybe. But it was better than being inside and crying over long division, so it was all worth it. Plenty of the games were pretty simple, like egg and spoon races, ring tosses, and hula hoop hopscotch, but the volunteer PTA moms who would run each game were trying their best, so I guess I can't be too harsh of a critic. Even more obstacle courses and tag team races were usually some of the bigger hits, and you better believe there was always an appearance from some of the most coveted gym equipment, like the butt scooters and the moon shoes, and even those sitting bouncy balls during some games. Though what everyone at my school always looked forward to the most was the water games. Even if it was just running through a sprinkler, which I guess isn't actually much of a game, at the end of the day, it didn't really matter what games Field Day had in store because the main appeal overall was that it didn't have any learning involved, and it was just a day to have fun and forget all of our troubles. Troubles like the PACER test. The PACER test. An infamous piece of American culture that almost needs no explanation, yet that I will give one anyway. Apparently, PACER is actually an acronym that stands for Progressive Aerobic Cardiovascular Endurance Run, an obnoxious and somewhat unnecessary acronym that really matches the energy of the test itself. I always assumed PACER meant that the test revolved around pacing yourself, and that it was possible to complete if you just timed it right. I'm sure the evil voice that gives the instructions in the beginning probably explains against that, but still, it's a bit of a misleading name. The amount of memes and copy pastas spread around based on this monstrosity of a test pretty much says it all, but if you never encountered the PACER test or only know it from the memes and wonder why so many people talk about it, allow me to describe this experience to you. You start on a line at the edge of the gym, with all of your other unassuming, single-digit aged classmates around you on the same line. The evil, or I guess pretty normal sounding, but evil intentioned voice explains the rules over the CD player, and then you hear it. The beep. Every time you hear this beep, you switch to the middle line of the gym, and each time the gap between beeps gets shorter and shorter. If you've never ran the PACER test yourself, this probably doesn't seem like that big of a deal. Maybe it even sounds easy. And during my first PACER test, I bet I even thought the same thing. But there's a reason that it's become a meme, and it's not because it was ever very funny.
End of level 1.
In the beginning, you can make it between the lines short enough to talk with your friends as you leisurely fast walk and stand around for a few seconds before the next beep. Whoever chose to make it start off so slow and nonchalant was definitely making a malicious decision to lure us into a false sense of security. Because while it does start out slow, in the wise words of the funny Shrek song, the beeps then just keep coming and they don't stop coming. It gets faster and faster until there's barely enough time for you to touch your toe to one line before the shrill beep from hell commands you to sprint right back to the other one. Even though you're not really a runner, because you usually spend all your time on the computer playing Webkins. Even though the beeps still just keep coming. Even though the 2008 smash hit song Burnin' Up by the Jonas Brothers perfectly describes your lungs as you struggle to run. You keep making your way from one line of the gym to the other. But finally, after a long and challenging battle with your lack of endurance and will to survive, you eventually turn in. Having given it all you had, making it all the way to level 6 out of like 20. And then you watch the PE teacher write down a number on a clipboard that makes you feel bad about yourself, sit down on the bleachers, watch as the rest of the kids continue to run, and think about your life. It does seem like the worst part of the PACER test wasn't just how hard it was, but that it made you feel bad if you didn't make it to the end, which most people rarely did. The super casual instructions in the beginning and the easy beginning stages make it feel like you should be able to keep going, especially when all of your classmates are testing at the same time so that everyone can see each other fail an almost impossible challenge. If you're one of the few kids that did ever manage to successfully complete the PACER test all the way to the end, you deserve a Lifetime Achievement Award. I'm still very impressed. Alongside such medieval torture methods like the PACER test, there were other tests that judged how well we performed physically. The stretching box is one that I guess wasn't that bad in hindsight, but still felt embarrassing to have to do it in front of all your friends. The same went for how many sit-ups you could do in a minute, and of course, who could forget the classic make kids dangle from the pull-up bar for 30 seconds in front of the whole class because their little twig arms aren't strong enough to do an actual pull-up test. Not that I would know anything about that one. But among such barbaric and theatrical performances, there was yet another test that my school held every year, but this one was different than the rest. This wasn't just some weird standardized fitness assessment that compared kids and ruined their self-esteem for a grade. It did still test and compare us to each other, but this time the prize was popularity, status, and glory. There was this program that extended to my whole district where each year kids would compete against each other in what was essentially the elementary school Olympics. There were different categories like a 100-meter dash, basketball, long jumping, and in each school, kids would compete for the best time or score in their category. And if you had the best score in your school, you were known as a pretty cool kid. Because after becoming a local legend, you then moved on to the ultimate competition. All the kids from each school, grade level, and category got to skip school for this epic event that was probably just held at some local soccer field, where the best of the best competed against each other for first place. I'm sure this is yet another case of things that seemed way cooler and more important in my head when I was younger, but at least when I was 8, this was a huge deal. And I managed to finally find my own PE success story in these elementary school Olympics, in a little category called speed rope. By the time I was old enough to try out, I had watched Jump In plenty of times, and my sister also competed in the speed rope category a few years before me, so you could say that this was my calling in a way. I made it my personal mission to qualify too, for my reputation, the family legacy, and for Corbin Blue. I know it all sounds a little dramatic, and it was, but I just don't think it can be understated how seriously I took this whole thing. I was so nervous and even a little shaky when I went to perform in front of the judges, aka jump rope kinda fast for some underpaid gym teachers. But I guess my dedication and complete lack of training of any kind actually paid off, because, spoiler alert, I got in. I wasn't just faster than the other entries, but the fastest speed roper in my entire grade. No, I don't know how many other kids tried out. I don't see how that's relevant. I will say though that I probably got a little too gassed up from being fastest little third grader at my school, because when it came to the district competition day, I mostly only remember the blur of really tiny little legs of girls that were much faster than me, and I walked away that afternoon with just a participation ribbon. RIP to my bold yet short-lived dream of being a professional speed roper, which I'm sure is totally a real thing. Even though I was beaten so badly at the epic elementary school Olympics, I did still kind of hold on to the idea that jump rope was like my thing for a little bit too long after. So when Jump Rope for Heart rolled around, I was pumped. Jump Rope for Heart is a fundraising program that raises money for the American Heart Association by teaching kids how to jump rope to stay healthy. But it wasn't just jump rope. They really wanted to make it look as cool as possible to get the most out of all of us impressionable kids, so they would show these videos of kids doing these sick jump rope tricks and jumps and stuff. It definitely worked in making everyone want to join in, because kids are relatively easy to impress. At least, they were when I was in school. Not to sound like a boomer, but I feel like in the age of Mr. Beast and Peter Griffin and Fortnite, a 480p video of jump rope tricks probably doesn't really have the same effect anymore. And if the sick tricks weren't enough, Jump Rope for Heart also had prizes you could earn by reaching certain donation goals, not unlike another type of school fundraiser you're maybe familiar with. While the prizes were probably just as cheap, if not even less exciting, obviously this time it was for a good cause, and the effort to get kids excited about exercising was an added bonus. While they were still relying on kids to knock on their neighbor's door and just randomly ask for money, I feel like it probably went over a bit better when the sponsor was the American Heart Association, instead of the buy our cookie dough for your school or something so your kid can ride in a limo guys. There was also Hoops for Heart, which was basically the basketball version of the same thing. I don't think I was quite as excited by Hoops for Heart though, because jump rope is admittedly a little more accessible as a skill, especially for beginners, and all the cool b-ball tricks they showed all the kids for the campaign looked admittedly way cooler, but also way harder, so I think I cut my losses pretty early with that one. I do still wonder how successful any of these fundraisers were, because even though the cause is more charitable, they still don't have a limo ride or money-blowing machine, so I hope that didn't totally blow their campaigns. While I wasn't the most for traditional sports, or apparently most physical exercise in general, when bowling lessons rolled around, I was all in. Alongside games like dodgeball with those child-safe, squishy foam balls that some kids could still manage to bruise you with, and of course anything involving what was basically just a toy disguised as exercise, like the moon shoes or the scooters, bowling was one of the most fun gym activities there was. I think my brain has been permanently altered to associate bowling with Wii Sports since 2006, and that paired with bowling at an elementary school age mostly being a birthday party exclusive activity made bowling days feel like such a treat. The way they rolled out the yellow carpets so that each group had their own private makeshift lane felt so extravagant, even though the reality was just a bunch of children rolling rubber balls down strips of dirty carpet in the middle of the gym. Along with the actual act of bowling, my school also tried teaching kids how to properly keep score while playing. I guess that does give it some extra education points, but if there were ever a time to pull the "when am I going to use this outside of school" card, I feel like learning to manually keep score on a bowling card is an appropriate time. Don't get me wrong, it's great to actually teach rules and mechanics of a game, but learning how to roll the ball straight or roll it at all instead of chucking it across the dusty yellow carpet definitely seems like a bigger priority. And rolling it in a straight line is way harder than it seems, okay? Well, it was for me, at least. It turns out that I just have weird double-jointed arms that make straight throws always just a little bit bent. Definitely think this had a hand in never making me feel like I could pursue bowling outside of a birthday party. I'm just gonna retroactively also blame my lack of skill in basketball and speed rope on the slight irregular bend of my arms, so that I feel better about my small failures. I don't know how much of my current state of physically inept, chronically online YouTuber was influenced by my elementary school gym classes, but I feel like it must have affected me a little bit. Even when things felt a little abstract or unorthodox, pretty much every PE class was guaranteed to be at least a little fun as a kid because it just felt like an extra recess. I have no idea what modern gym class is like now, but I hope that kids are still getting to experience things like field day and rubber bowling and their first taste of defeat in something that's not even really considered a sport, because not everything has to be educational. And best that they're encouraged to stay active at a young age so that hopefully they won't get too attached to the internet and computer games while they're still young and end up becoming a YouTuber like me. Always remember to keep scooterboarding, kids. Hi, welcome to JellyTV, where I shout out a video that I think deserves some love. I recommend watching The Downfall of Boomerang by Urbz. Boomerang is one of those channels that I feel like no one really talks about, yet that had such a prominent place in early 2000s TV. Urbz does a great job in covering it all by really diving into the cartoon lore, the channel's history, and its controversies. If you have a soft spot for cartoons like I do, or you just want to learn about the antics of a forgotten TV network, then you should give this video a watch. A huge thank you to Daniel E. from ABQ, Kevin Evans, Brett Morgan, Bunzo, Eliza, Findicano and Irise, Grayson, Hasta Luego Luca, Hayden Campbell, Johan Ake, Knuckleoso, Lojwa Animal, Lou, Lucy Likes Tegan and Sarah, Louisa, Luna Stephenson, Mark Kent, M. Wee, Paper Sam, Pharmamags, Pixel Puppy, Shaples, Starbit Illustrations, Theodore Nicolawilius, Vivian Valencia, and the rest of my patrons for supporting me. Looks like the Pacer test results just came in. I hope you guys ran better than I did.